it do, what it do? It's your boy Andre Spruell, and you are tuning in to the Middle of the Fence podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day, whether you're listening, watching, or both. As I like to say, time is the most valuable thing on this earth because we can spend it, but can't make it back. So as always, thank you for your time. And today is the very first episode of the Middle of the Fence podcast series that I'm bringing to you guys. I'm so excited to be bringing this to you guys. It's been about 2 years in the making, had some ups and downs with it, but finally just taking the action to put it forward. And for those that have supported some of my smaller projects previously, such as the weekly blog series that I had during the dreaded COVID times, and also to the Instagram Black History Month series that I had in 2021. And thank you guys that have supported me from the early stages. And if you're new, welcome to the show. And just a quick overview of the Middle of the Fence podcast. So this is not another toxic masculinity podcast. It's not another true crime doc series. It's not another political podcast, even though we may get into that from time to time. But it's about two very different worlds. One that we will call the tough terrain side, and the other side that we'll call the Affluent Acres side. So to delve a little further into each side and what it means. So the tough terrain side is a challenging environment with economic struggles, systemic issues, but also resilience and community strength, aka the hood. And you have the Affluent Acre side, which is the complete opposite, which is a place of comfort and resources where opportunities are abundant, but challenges still exist, like pressure to succeed and isolation, aka the suburbs. And the reason why I'm focusing on both sides of the fence is because I grew up on both sides simultaneously. I grew up in Orange, New Jersey, which has historically been one of the highest crime-rated neighborhoods in New Jersey, while also getting a private school education in Morris County from kindergarten through 12th grade, which has historically been one of the top 10 richest counties in the country. Not just New Jersey, but the whole US of A. And another aspect, too, on top of growing up on both sides, is the fact that I'm biracial. So if you're watching this, you may think, what is he? Is he black and white? Is he Dominican? Is he Puerto Rican? I'm actually Black American and Argentinian. So the reason why that's brought up as well as a factor on top of growing up simultaneously on both sides of the fence is the fact that there is a large rise in biracial couples. And according to an August 2024 article from Forbes, over the last decade, there has been a 276% increase in the population of multiracial people in the United States. Again, a 276% increase in the population of multiracial people in the United States, and that number seemingly is going to continue to grow and grow. So it's important to also share the aspects of the stories growing up being multiracial as well, since it's only going to keep growing and growing. And a little bit about Orange. So like I mentioned, it is a high crime rated neighborhood, even though it is in the early stages of gentrification. According to city data with the 2020 census, the crime rate in Orange had a score of 245 when it comes to crime rate, which is higher than in nearly 82% of U.S. cities. And you contrast that with Morris County, which is the Affluent Acres side. The median household income in Morris County is $130,808 per year compared to Orange's $50,607 per year. So nearly a 3 times difference in median household incomes, and with that, there's obviously great differences as well. But when people think of the differences, they mostly think of the financial difference, of course. But the biggest difference that I would say between both sides of the fence is as simple as access and opportunity. So the Affluent Acres side offers an abundance of resources, financial stability, and better educational opportunities. And that is part of the reason why my family personally made the sacrifice to make sure that I got an education on the Affluent Acres side despite growing up on the tough terrain side, because they just knew that the amount of opportunities would be much more. And even though financially it didn't make much sense to do so, they knew that in the long run it would be the best decision, and can't say that they're wrong with that. And you contrast that with the tough terrain side, where people must work harder for opportunities, often with limited access to resources. So for example, there could be a child that grows up on the tough terrain side who maybe wants to be an engineer or something along those lines, but when he goes to school, he may not have access to the best tools to explore that talent. And when he's home, he likely won't have access to the tools to explore that talent. And even with growing up on the tough terrain side and having the access and opportunity of someone that grew up on the Affluent Acres side, I still felt that I had to work so much harder for my opportunities. When you see the peers that I went to school with on the Affluent Acres side, most of them, while they were in college or as soon as they graduated, they were able to get into a good company that their parents knew someone there or a friend of a friend, and were able to get in right away, set themselves up much better financially, and hit the ground running. And someone like myself, even having similar access and opportunity to the peers on the Affluent Acres side, I had to get my foot in the door and work about 4 or 5 years before I was even able to sniff a similar opportunity as the peers that I grew up with on the Affluent Acres side. And like I mentioned, people just think of the financial differences and don't really think about much else. But I wanted to delve into the biggest hurdles on the Affluent Acres side and then the biggest hurdles on the tough terrain side, just to get a better understanding of how exactly things go based off of experience. So one of the biggest hurdles on the Affluent Acres side is lack of resilience. So with fewer struggles and obstacles, they may not develop the same level of grit, ability, or problem-solving skills as someone that grew up on the tough terrain side. So an example would be in high school when you saw the kids that got straight A's and private tutoring and Ivy League bound and things like that. And the day that they failed a test or got a grade that they weren't extremely happy about, let's say, you saw the defeat and frustration. And instead of having that fight to bounce back and just get a better grade, it just seemed like everything just came in to just say, I can't do this. Like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe that this happened. And just facing that type of adversity just was so hard for some of those students to overcome. And again, it's no disrespect or anything like that, but it's just one of the things that I noticed while growing up and going to school on the Affluent Acre side. And another hurdle on the Affluent Acre side is the pressure to succeed. So having the high expectation from family and community may create an insane level of pressure. And that pressure to succeed usually stems from academically, like if someone on the Affluent Acre side didn't get into the same school that their parent and grandparent went to, or didn't get into certain Ivy League schools, it was like the end of the world. And another example of the pressure to succeed on the Affluent Acre side is following in the family business. And so whether it was restaurant-based or a practice like being a doctor or a lawyer, and if the child chose to take a different path other than the family business, they would get a lot of heat and pushback from their families as a result. And again, that was just another common hurdle that I noticed on the Affluent Acre side. And in Konstantin Satis's 1964 study titled The Culture of the Suburb, it's advised that suburban children studied in the initial phase of the project seemed to place a high value of achievement and revealed a rigid adherence to certain standards, such as dress and behavior. So that just goes to show that even a study that dates as far back as 1964 illustrates just the amount of pressure that gets put on kids on the Affluent Acre side. And the next hurdle, limited perspective. And personally, I feel like this is the biggest one that I've noticed. And when you grow up in a bubble of privilege, it might limit their understanding of the challenges faced by people from other backgrounds and making it harder for them to develop empathy or a broader worldview. Because often what happens is you have the families that grow up and live in those affluent area neighborhoods for generations. So as a result, that's all they really know, and that's the world. And all the traveling that they may do while growing up on the Affluent Acre side, it's still, at the end of the day, it comes off as not meaning much at times because of that limited perspective, because you're only used to interacting with people that look like you, that talk like you, that dress like you. And as a result, some of the differences that may limit their perspective is if you grow up on the Affluent Acre side most of your life and you're forced to interact with someone that's a different race or religion or sexual orientation or things along those lines, that can make things difficult because of that limited perspective for those that grow up on the Affluent Acre side. And the last hurdle for the Affluent Acre side is entitlement and isolation. So some might develop a sense of entitlement or superiority and could struggle with building meaningful connections with people outside of their socioeconomic class. So that kind of ties in with the last point that I made with the limited perspective. And when you think of entitlement and isolation, I don't know about you guys, but I personally think of those Karen videos. So I have a few favorites, but if you have one in mind that you really like, just drop the link for it in the comments so we can get a little laugh in regards to the entitlement hurdle for those on the Affluent Acre side. And now that we're wrapped up with the hurdles on the Affluent Acre side, we're going to jump to the hurdles for the tough terrain side. And the biggest hurdle to start off is limited access to education. So obviously, schools in the underfunded areas on the tough terrain side it leads to lower academic performances and fewer opportunities for most of those children. And like I stated before, that this is the sole sacrifice that, on top of other sacrifices, of course, for my family, but that was the biggest sacrifice, was not sending us to our local public high school, because I'm sure that we still would have been really good students and have a good head on our shoulders and things like that, but it definitely would have been a lot more difficult to stay away from all of the not so good things that were happening in the neighborhood that I grew up in on the tough terrain side, and especially because in Orange, New Jersey, they historically have ranked towards the bottom when it comes to school rankings, usually in the bottom 5 or bottom 10, and that's out of 200 or 300 something schools. So it just goes to show. And then obviously on the Affluent Acres side, for the education levels, it's much different, and it yields much different results. And the second hurdle for the tough terrain side is economic hardships. And this is the one that most people just see, when you're driving through the neighborhoods on the tough terrain side. You see the row homes that are all in line right next to each other. You see the walls that have a bunch of graffiti on it and things like that, and you just see that the houses aren't as nice as you would see on the Affluent Acre side. The economic hardships that can be faced on the tough terrain side, such as financial instability, often leads to challenges like food insecurity, unstable housing, and lack of access to healthcare, which can impact both physical and mental health. And the economic hardships, again, though my family sacrificed for myself and my siblings and my cousin to get a private school education, when it comes to finances, it was never really talked about. And the only memory of the economic hardships that really stood out growing up is seeing my parents, constantly arguing about money, as far as like paying each other back and figuring out how they're going to pay the tuition for us to continue going to private school and things like that. So part of the mental and physical effects is you in turn end up not being so good with money. And I personally didn't learn to establish good financial habits until my late 20s as a result, but again, it's just one of the hurdles that you face on the tough terrain side, because it's just part of your environment. And the next hurdle is exposure to violence. So living in environments with higher crime rates can create stress, trauma, and a heightened sense of danger, which can affect mental and emotional well-being. And according to a USA Today article from 2019, Black men and boys ages 15 to 34 make up just 2% of the nation's population. They were among 37% of gun homicides that year. That's 20 times higher than white males of the same age group. So, a personal story of the exposure to violence on the tough terrain side. So, I wasn't harmed in it, just putting it out there now. But it's a story that someone told me that has stuck with me forever. So, my first job outside of college was working at a nursing home as a dietary aide. So, I basically was responsible for bringing breakfast, lunch, and dinner to old people. And the nursing home was in Morris County, again, one of the top 10 richest counties in the country. But most of the staff was Black and lived in areas similar to where I lived in Orange, and they lived in East Orange and Orange, most of them, so similar high crime rated neighborhoods. And I remember I was 22 and one of my coworkers was turning 21. So I asked her, I'm like, oh, like, what are you gonna do for your 21st birthday? Because I remember when I turned 21, I was in college. Everyone was buying me shots and drinks, and I got really, really drunk, and like I woke up and I was like, oh my gosh, like what happened? And just told her about how much fun I had. And her response, she said, I don't know what I'm gonna do for my 21st birthday, but I'm just glad to make it to 21 because most of my friends haven't. Again, I'm glad to make it to 21 because most of my friends haven't, and that's just something that is hard to ever forget and just further emphasizes the hurdle that is faced when it comes to the exposure to violence on the tough terrain side. And the last hurdle is lack of role models. So, with limited access to successful individuals from their community, youth may struggle to envision a path to success, and as a result, they may get involved with crowds that they otherwise shouldn't. And another personal story just to bring it home for this one, So, growing up on the tough terrain side, my neighbors, so it was our house, the house next to us, and then the house next to them. All of the kids, we were all around the same age. So literally since we were all like, 3, 5, 7 years old, we would all just play games and use our imagination and play outside for hours on end until it got dark out and one of our families yelled out that dinner was ready, so bring your ass inside. And but there was one kid that grew up with us, and when I came back home from college for winter break, I was 21 at the time, and I saw him, and I won't say his name to protect his family's privacy, but I saw him walking by, and I was like, hey, like, how's it going? And when he saw me, he was just like, oh my gosh, Andre, what's up, man? Like, how's it going? Like, hope all is well. And I was like, thanks, man, and have a good rest of your day. And he's like, thanks, you as well. And then I found out that 3 hours later, he passed away because he got involved with the wrong crowd and suffered a gunshot wound to his head as a result. And he was only 17 years old. But for those that knew him, he was someone that was just always happy and full of life. And, when I think about it, I feel like he's a perfect example of, if he had more access and opportunities to, let's say a role model that was able to, make sure he wasn't getting involved in those matters because his family tried, but if he had a role model that was there, to yank him out, and you never know how much different that would look. So, but yeah, so again, I don't really want to end things on such a sour note, but these are the realities that those on the tough terrain side face. And then we also delved into some of the hurdles that are faced on the Affluent Acres side, and how the biggest difference is the access and opportunity. And we spoke about what the show is about and what to expect and things of that nature. So again, thank you so much for tuning in. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on whatever your favorite streaming podcast platforms are. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to do the same. And if you're on YouTube, please be sure to hit that little notification bell so you can be the first to be notified when the latest episodes drop. And no matter what side of the fence that you grew up on, we are all more alike than we think. My name is Andre Spruell. Catch you guys next time.